Hey everyone, it's Coach Damon with Lacrosse Goalie Rat, and in this video, I'm going to string up this ECD Impact head with the ECD Impact semi-hard mesh. So here I've got my materials. I've got the ECD head, I've got the ECD semi-hard complete kit, which comes with everything that you need to string up a head. And the only other items we're going to need are a pair of scissors and a lighter. Let's get into it. Okay, just to review real quickly what comes in the ECD 12 diamond goalie complete kit semi-hard. You get the semi-hard mesh, you get a cotton bottom string, you get 4 nylon strings for the sidewall, and the top string, and I guess an extra. You get 3 cotton laces for the shooting strings, and you get a nylon for the shooting string, and you also get a little screw. That's everything that comes in the semi-hard complete ECD Impact complete kit. First thing we're going to do when stringing a goalie head is actually break in and stretch out the mesh. So when you get a new piece of mesh, it's going to be super stiff, all pulled together, and what we're going to do is open that up and just stretch it out, and as much as you can, you're going to break in this mesh. Just pull it every which way, stretch all of these diamonds, really break it in before we start to string up this goalie head. Okay, so now I've stretched out the mesh a little bit, and what you'll find is one of the sides of the mesh is a little bit rougher than the other. One side is a little bit rough, one side is a little bit smooth. You want the rough side touching the ball. So what I'm going to do is this other side over here is the rough side. On the top, I'm going to fold back the top row until I get 11 diamonds. This is 12 diamond mesh. We want an odd number of rows. So this works even if you're using 10 diamond mesh, 17 diamond mesh, 20 diamond mesh. So I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. So I've folded back the top, and I'm going to start stringing the top string. All right, so let's now attach the top string, and I know a lot of stringers, expert stringers, unlike myself, start at the side and go across. As a basic stringer, what I like to do is actually start in the middle and then go out. So that's what I'm going to do. So I've got my mesh, I've got one of the sidewall strings, and one of the nice things about the ECD kit is these are actually already, if I can get that to focus, tipped, so that they've got little shoelace things. I can't get it to focus. That's all right. Anyway, there we go. You can kind of see that. So if you don't have that, what you want to do is take the lighter, burn it, and then create those little things. These things are pre-cut, but if they're not pre-cut, if you're just working off a spool, a good rule of thumb to get the length is start at the bottom, run it to the top, run that back to the bottom, and then run that back to the top. So 3 lengths, 1, 2, 3, and that's a good estimate of the length. So let's do the first top knot. What I'm going to do is find that knot right in the middle. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. It would be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and I'm going to attach that middle knot right to the middle. And the way I'm going to do that, I'm going to get both of the ends of my string here. I'm going to run that through this hole. I'm going to run it through the underside of the stick. So through the top part of the stick. I'm going to pull that. Whoop, I'm caught on the mesh down here. I'm going to pull that, and then I'm going to run these back through that hole that it creates. And pull that tight. So that is going to create a knot. It's kind of hard to see there. That is going to create a knot that looks like that. And that is going to be our top knot. Okay, so now we have our top center diamond connected to the very middle hole. We're now going to start continuing the top string by stringing out. And the way that we're going to do that, we're going to take this string. I'm going to go through the back. I'm going to go through the back of the head. I'm going to come through this loop of the mesh and make sure that the string has come through this loop on the top string, okay? Pull that tight, pull out some of the slack. Now what I'm gonna do is go through the same hole in the mesh. And then I'm gonna go through the hole on the stick on the front, through the front, pull that through. And before I pull it all the way tight, I want to make sure that this string goes into this loop. And then we can pull out the mesh, the slack, I should say. And then you get a knot that looks similar to that one we just created right there. Okay, so let's continue with this top hole on the other side. And again, I'm gonna do the same exact thing. I'm gonna go through the back of the plastic on the head. I'm gonna come through this diamond. Make sure to go through the loop. And I'm gonna pull that a little bit tight. Now we're gonna run it back through the same exact hole in the mesh. I'm gonna come through the front of the plastic on the head. And before I pull that all the way tight, I wanna run this back through this little loop that it creates. And I like to pull out the slack as we go along. You can certainly do it like this to get it as tight as possible. Just checking in. We now have 1, 2, 3 top loops. This one's a little bit off. We can stretch out our mesh a little bit there. 1, 2, 3 top loops, and we'll continue with this hole, this hole, this hole, and that hole. Okay, now I've strung the top knot all the way across using that same technique, and you can see what it looks like. And what we are left with on the sides is a diamond of mesh right here and the little end piece right there. And we're essentially just going to bunch that up, pinch it in, and tie that off together. But you can see what the top knot looks like in this stringing pattern. I've pulled it tight at every step of the way, so it's pretty tight across the top. And again, on this side, what we're going to do, we've got a diamond here, and we've got a little end piece. We're going to bunch that together and tie it off so that we can start doing our sidewall string down the side. So let me show you how I do that. Okay, in order to tie off these last 2 diamonds, I don't really do anything special here. Perhaps I should consult Mr. Wonderful on how to do this a little bit better. I'm just going to go through the back of the mesh, come through this hole, pull that through, and then essentially just do that one more time while wrapping this around, so I capture and keep that little piece of mesh tight. And I'll go through the hole again, through that same hole that I just went through, through the back of the mesh, and then I've got a little loop right there. And I'm just going to pull that tight, and that is going to hold that extra mesh. Really, the important thing is we want to make sure that this first sidewall right here can connect to this first sidewall hole. So there's a lot of different ways to do this side knot. This is probably not the best way. That's what I go with. And then what we're going to do is go ahead and tie a double knot on this one as close as you can to the bottom of the string. And there you go. You've got the top string pulled tight across the top. I'll go ahead and do that same thing on the other side to secure those 2 diamonds. Okay, one more shot of that final top string on the ECD impact, and now we are ready to do our sidewalls. In the modern sticks, there's so many sidewall holes. There's so many different options. You'll hear stringers talk about patterns, which is essentially, what holes do I use to connect and what type of knots do I use to connect the mesh. Before we start stringing up this sidewall, I want to show you some different types of knots. This is a head that was strung by a stringer much better than than myself, but you can, Mr. Wonderful, you can see the different types of knots. You have this type of knot right here, which is called an SI, specialty interlock. And essentially what that means is we are taking the corner of the mesh and attaching it directly to this hole, right? So this cannot move. This cannot move. It is attached. And when you go down a little bit further, you'll see a different type of knot like this one right here, right? Which is not connected. It can slide up and down this sidewall hole. This is just an interlock. This is an SI. I believe this is called an I. I'm not 100% sure on that, but that is a different type of knot. Here's the same idea, right? That one can slide, that one can slide, that one can slide, that one can slide. So the idea, the general theory of pockets is we want to make it really tight up here, a lot of SIs, really tight. And then as we get down here, we're going to bunch it a little bit more so that we can get that pocket, right? So there's a lot more mesh, a lot more material in this area. And that allows you to get, that nice channel, that deep pocket that we're going for. So that is the general idea of what we're trying to do with the sidewalls. And that is some, and that is what these knots look like. Okay, so let's start doing our sidewall. I've got one of my sidewall strings. I've put a big knot in there, and I'm just going to take the end of that string, and I'm going to go through the outside of this. I'm just going to take the end of that string. I'm going to go through the outside of the stick. I'm going to go through this first diamond of mesh right here, and really I'm just creating an anchor. I'm going to pull that through. And then I'm just going to do that again. So I'm going to go, let me find the end of the stick, the end of the string here. I'm going to go through that hole once more. I'm going to go through through the hole of mesh once more and pull that through. Nothing special here. This is just tying it off. Okay, and we'll pull that tight. Then I'm going to skip one. I'm going to tie the next row of mesh with an SI, okay? So I've pulled that tight. And for the SI, what I'm going to do, let me find the end of my string here. I'm going to go, where's the end? There's the end. I'm going to go through the mesh from the outside in. I'm going to go through the inside of the head to the inside out. I'm going to pull that. And then what I want to do before I pull it tight is go back through this loop right here. Go back through that loop, and then I can pull that tight. And that right there is, pull all the slack out of there. That right there is my SI knot. So if I pull that tight, you can see that this piece of mesh is connected to the plastic. Okay, and then really I just want to do that all the way down for these first couple of mesh holes. So I'm going to pull this, I'm going to skip one, and I'm going to do the next piece of mesh. I'm going to skip one, do the next piece of row of mesh to this hole right here, okay? So I go through the outside of the mesh. We're going to skip one. We might even be able to skip two. That is kind of the idea of the pattern, is to play with the tension. I'm just going to skip one for now, but that's the idea of a pattern, is to get different tensions in the stick so that, you get a good pocket and it throws really well. Come back through that loop. And then pull that tight. So you can see our knots starting to form all the way down the side. And we've got, a good amount of tightness, good amount of tension in this very top. Okay. I'm going to keep going like that all the way down, really just playing with the, with the tension. So right now, let's say I want to, instead of doing it, skipping one, I might skip two and, do the next one down here. So I'll skip two, and then we'll just do the exact same thing for that knot where I go outside in. This time I'm going to skip 1, 2, and go here. Let me get this, pull this through. And then before you pull it all the way tight, you want to come back. Get my hands out of the way. Before you pull it all the way tight, you want to come back through that loop that we've just created. And now we can pull that tight. So there you go. That's skipping 1, 2, and now we've pulled it together like that. So I'm going to keep going all the way down the side and pull that down. So like I said, the general theory of the head is up top here, we want to use a lot of SIs. We want a lot of tension, and then when we get to these bottom strings, not so much. Now we can start to bunch it up, and I'll show you how to do those knots right now. Okay, so now I want to show you the other type of knot. These were all SIs, locking it down, right? Now we're going to show you a non-interlock, where it can slide. So I essentially do the same thing where I'm going to go through the outside of the mesh and then through the inside of the plastic. We're not going to skip one this time. I'm going to go in that next hole, pull that through. Now, instead of going through that loop, the SI, right, we went through the loop before. I'm not going to do that. I'm going to pull it a little bit tight, and I'm just going to go inside the string. So I'm not grabbing this mesh inside that little hole. And if I pull this through and pull it tight, you'll now see that this piece of mesh is connected, and yet it slides, right? So the idea, like I said, is we're going to bunch up the stick in this lower part to get a lot more mesh. We're super tight, super stretched up here, but when you get down to the bottom, we're going to bunch it up so that we can build that pocket. So let me do that one more time. I'm going to take the next piece of mesh, and I'm not going to skip a hole, so you can start to see it sort of bunch up right there, which is exactly what we do want. I'm going to take that, I'm going to go through the outside of the mesh. And then again, instead of coming through that hole, I'm not going to do an interlock so that we can have it bunched. I'm going to pull that tight like that. And then when I pull it tight, now you can start to see this mesh sort of bunch up a little bit, right? And now we're forming a nice pocket. Okay, so now you can see I've done the same exact knot on 1, 2, 3, 4 in a row all the way to the bottom. Those are the non-interlocks to sort of bunch it up right here. And then we're going to tie it off on this first bottom hole right here. And to tie it off, it's really the same thing as we did up top. I'm going to find that next row of mesh. I'm going to go through the outside, through the hole, and then I'm going to do that again, through the outside, through the hole, pull that tight, and then I'm just going to tie a double knot right here so that it doesn't go through. And there we go. So now I am tied off right there, and you can see our head, starting to take shape. We're super tight up here, and then we're bunched up here, and you can even see that pocket, starting to form. And as I run my hand through it, right? I can feel like it's loose right here and then it gets tight at the top, and that's exactly what we want. All right, so that is our sidewall. I'm now going to do the exact same thing on the other side. Okay, so now we've got both of our sides laced up, and you can see the pocket sort of starting to take shape there. One of the things you can do now, or even before as well, is start to pound this out. So, either with your hand or take a baseball bat and just rub it through and start to build that pocket. You'll start to get that shape and get that feel in the pocket, okay? One thing that's really important as you want to do is try and keep the tensions the same on both sides. I'm not an expert stringer. You can see there's a little bit more tension over on this side as there is on that side, but ideally you want the exact same tension in the same spots on the stick as on both sides. So that will come obviously with experience, but you can see we've got our pocket in there. It's starting to take shape. Not the best channel in the world. In fact, not a very good channel at all. If I can get an angle here. Decent channel. Let's go decent, okay? Not great, but again, this is just, I'm a very basic, a very beginner stick stringer. Anyway, so now let's do the bottom string. So this is still loose. We're now going to connect the bottom of the mesh to this part here. Okay, so now I'm going to show you a very basic bottom string to finish off the bottom here. I've got the cotton nylon, the shorter one that comes with the kit. I'm going to go through this bottom hole, and really we just want to find the row of mesh that lines up, right? So I'm going to go through this one right here, through the bottom hole. I'm actually going to skip the outside diamond. Let me see if I can get you a shot of that. So we're going to go through, and this is where you can play with the depth too. You can tie off at different points on the mesh here. So if I want a deeper pocket, more of a bag, I can move that up and tie down here. And then when that'll create a deeper pocket. Or if I want it more shallow, I can make it tighter, tie out a tighter diamond of rows, and that'll be a shallower pocket, okay? So that's where you can play with the depth. We're going to go with this one right here. So I'm going to skip that outer diamond, and then I'm going to come in through here, and then essentially just going to weave through this row of diamonds, going above the mesh, below the mesh, above the mesh, below the mesh, just weaving it through, all the way through, above the mesh, below the mesh, above the mesh, below the mesh, until I get to that last one, and then I've got something like this. Pull it through, and then I'm going to go back through that right there. And then instead of tying it, tying off two knots right here and right here, I'm essentially just going to tie these two together, tie themselves together. So I'll do, an overhand knot there, and then do that again. And, as you, so we got that right there. As you, play with this, and you want to make sure, obviously, that no ball can fit through there, but that looks good, no problem there. As you, begin to play with this, this might be something you need to adjust because it will definitely stretch out. But there you go. That is the bottom knot, and that's how you do it. Okay, so now we will put in a couple of shooting strings. I'll show you how to do that. Shooting strings are just going to add a little bit of rebound control and a little bit of more tension at the top to help with that release a little bit. So I've got my shooting string. There's a bunch of different shooting string designs that you can do. I'm not going to talk about the theory. I'm just going to go with two straights towards the top. So what we're going to do is essentially pick our row of diamonds. So I'm going to go with this one right here. So there's the 1, 2, I guess it's 1, 2, 3, third one down. And I'm essentially just going to, on the way over, I'm just going to weave it through the top, through the bottom. Right, so over the mesh, under the mesh, over the mesh, under the mesh, over the mesh, under the mesh, over the mesh, under the mesh. Try to keep this string as flat as you can. And when we come back, we'll see why. It just makes it a lot easier. Over the mesh, under the mesh, on the same row of diamonds, over the mesh, and under the mesh. When we get to the bottom, all the way to the other side, we need to anchor it. I've seen some people tie it off around the entire head. I don't think that looks as good, so we're just going to loop it through this sidewall hole right here. All right, so I've got it looped through that sidewall hole, and then I'm going to come back, okay? All right, so when I come back, I'm essentially just going to weave it. So let's actually start going over the top this way, and we're caught right here. And then coming back underneath over the top on this one, and then underneath on that one. You can kind of get the idea of what I'm doing with this shooting string to weave it. And as much as you can, again, you want to keep the it, you know, as straight as possible, just so it looks good, performs a little bit better. So we'll keep doing that. Over the top, underneath, over the top, underneath, and over the top. Underneath and over the top. And did I miss one right here? Finally, under. Pull that through. And in order to, you know, we'll just tie these two pieces together. So to end the shooting string, we'll just make a little knot. Pull this one through. I've seen, if you can, I've seen a lot of stringers actually put these guys through the holes. If you can fit it through there. That's a little tricky. I'm not going to do that. I'm just going to tie it around. All right. And I'll just tie that off right there. So there is one of our straights. Again, we don't want it too tight. You could play with the tension of that, but that is how you put in a shooting string. So I'm now going to put in another one right below that. All right, so here is our finished product. We've got the shooters in there now. We've got the bottom string in there now, and you can start to break it in and perhaps, you know, adjust some of these sidewalls. There you go. Like I said, I'm a very basic beginner stringer, and you can see, you know, not a great channel, but still a decent channel that's going to throw okay. There you go. Let me know if you have any questions on how to string that up.